Hello, my name is Matthew Reese, and I'm here to talk about some uh, draft analysis. So we've got, I'm going to go ahead and present, about 45 minutes to an hour. We're going to talk about web scraping, data blending, and logistic regression to predict future NFL Pro Bowlers and reveal NFL draft busts. So without any further ado, I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen, and you should see it now. Okay, cool. So there we go. So we already mentioned what we're going to do. We'll go to our next slide here. Actually, move. All right, there we go. So people ask me, well, how are you doing this, and how are you building your model? So basically, what I've been able to do is that I've been able to take use something called web scraping. So for those who don't know about web scraping, basically what you're doing with web scraping is the fact that you are going to a website. In this case, the NFL Draft Wikipedia page from 2001 to 2021. And what we're doing here is we're going to go through there and scrape the data off. So basically, you're just going to each page and what's called a macro that I'm using from a software called Alteryx, a batch macro, and then just you go in the 2001 page, and then the 2002 page, all the way to 2021 page. Same thing for the Pro Bowl data and the Pro Football Reference, 2001 to 2021. So what I'm able to do there is once we get all the data from all those, we are using something called a join to be able to take the data from both the Pro Football Reference and match it up with the Wikipedia page. And as you can see, from 2001 to 2021, we've got several Pro Bowl players. Obviously, Tom Brady leading the list, 15, Drew Brees, 13, Aaron Rodgers, Peyton Manning, and on down the line there, Joe Thomas with 10. And so what I decided to do is, I've worked on this for a couple of years, is to develop what's called a logistic model with binary 0-1. So a pick is considered a good pick if the player is named to the Pro Bowl, and the alternates don't count. So essentially, either you're going to be yes, a Pro Bowler, or no, not a Pro Bowler. And the pick is a good pick if you are a Pro Bowler, and no if you're not a Pro Bowler. So we'll talk a little bit about that soon. Again, that's Pro Bowler since 2001. So previous to that, we're not going to get involved in. And it was just weird because Tom Brady himself actually was not actually included, since he was actually drafted in 2004 that starts. However, he has gotten 15 Pro Bowls in the interim. All right, next slide. So as you can see here, you got Tom Brady way up here at 15 Pro Bowls. Got Aaron Rodgers at 14, Peyton Manning, he's over here at 12, and then you get Larry Fitzgerald, Joe Thomas, and whatnot. Now, I also mentioned is the fact that, hey, down here you get Muhammad Wilkerson. Hey, he's got 1 Pro Bowl. Dominic Rogers Cromartie, he's got 2 there. So what we're seeing here is the fact that, according to the model, the player with 1 Pro Bowl is essentially the same as the player with 15 Pro Bowls. And then, so I'm just showing this just to say, hey, you know what? Clearly, if you look at the drafting model, there's a huge difference between a player who gets 15 Pro Bowls and one gets 1. However, we're looking to say, let's just say, for the fact of simply drafting players, we're looking to draft players that are going to be contributors, and thus they're going to be Pro Bowlers. All right. Next, taking a look at what I mentioned before. Hey, logistic regression specific. Okay, so best situation with outcome is binary. The pros, also best when the category variables are concluded. And the cons, hey, use of the log odds as well as not direct correlation to an instance or result probability, right? So without getting too far into logistic regression, you can see there, the binary dependent variable in each trials and everything else. What we'll say is that essentially what we're using is the piece probably of success for any given student, any given the X's, right? And in this one, they're using SAT math versus an academic warning, right? So the fact that and this particular example they're using here, they're saying, you know what, the higher you are on your SAT math, right, the success for any student that will give a warning or not a warning. So they're saying, hey, you know what, the higher your math score is, the less chance you'd get for a SAT warning. But back to the NFL and our logistic regression, what we're saying is, there is a relationship between all of our factors and the probability that that someone is going to be a Pro Bowler. Okay, so we started looking at, so what are some of those variables? Looking at draft years, we're looking at team, college, and conference, and then we went from there. And as I mentioned before, hey, all Pro Bowlers are treated the same. Tom Brady was the same as Zach Diossi. He actually had one Pro Bowl. He was a special teams player, and so forth. All right, moving on. What are some things I struggle with? Data cleaning and munging issues. So in order to marry up the data from Wikipedia to the data from Pro Football Reference, I had to make sure that a couple of things. One, that the players would actually join. So you'd have someone like AJ Green, where, at one point it was A.J. Green. When it was AJ with a space J, Angel Green, or his full name, Angel Jeremiah Green at the bottom. So AJ Green was kind of a pain to make sure that all of his Pro Bowls, lined up. However, we made that happen, so that wasn't so bad. There was some other interesting things with data cleaning and munging that I had to deal with. One was the fact that, in some cases you have more than one player with the same name. Believe it or not, there are two players by the name of Adrian Peterson. Adrian Peterson that was just by the Vikings with the Pro Bowl. There was another Adrian Peterson that was a cornerback that was drafted, and I had to go back through and make sure that that erroneously did not get in there for the player. So sometimes we had to make sure when we're doing a join, we're using the name and position in order to properly join and thus not alter my model. Okay, also looking at conferences. So as you can see here, TCU, they started off in 2001 in the WAC, then they moved to the Mountain West 2015 before moving to the Big 12 2019. So, you had them in different conferences. And, how do I treat that? So I had to say, I actually did a different variable. So I said, hey, I had a 2015 conference to 2019 conference. And as you can see, with some of the other conference realignment, Oklahoma and Texas moving to the SEC, potentially in the future, I have to deal with the fact that, hey, we have some more conference realignment, especially the big conferences, let alone some of those other conferences such as the Sun Belt and Conference USA, which has seen even more turmoil. So with that, moving on, one more data cleaning munging issue I did have. As you can see, Miami, Florida. There's two Miami, Floridas. Sometimes it'll be showing you here's Miami space Florida or Miami, Florida with parentheses. This, by the way, is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, just if you don't know. Or Miami, Ohio, totally separate school in the MAC in Ohio. The University of Hawaii, as you guys may or may not know, the official spelling of Hawaii, Hawai, Hawai, versus the postal spelling, with just Hawaii. And then when I was doing the web scraping, as you can see here, it came out as this weird, I think, hexagonal code. For some of you guys who might know it better, I'm not going to get into that. They might have it even better. It's this crazy hexagonal code that showed up. So it was really interesting, to say the least. And then last but not least, you have South Florida versus USF, University of South Florida. So I had to go back and use a lookup table to convert USF to South Florida. And you can see here was these are the school names, these are the aliases. So I said, for purposes of the U, it's going to be Miami, Florida versus Hawaii and South Florida, as I mentioned. So we're not going to take too much of a look at the workflow. However, we'll show everyone really quickly what we're looking at. So as you can see, this is a fairly advanced Alteryx workflow for those of you guys who are into it. And I built this over time, and I want to give some credit to the London Data School, UK Data School there. I borrowed some of theirs in my development and so forth. So without getting too much into it, I'm going to show you all just a little bit up here using a batch macro. We went through, and this is where we're web scraping using Wikipedia, and down here Pro Football Reference, and then down here is my all-important join. And you can see right here I'm using my all-important join, and that is important because I need to know of all the players who are drafted, how many of these players are actually go to the Pro Bowl later. And that was one of the ways I was able to do that, is by joining those two. And then over here, we've got some of our modeling. So you can see where I using a logistic modeling, and then this is a stepwise. So some of those you folks who just tuned in to hear about football and my bust and everything else, I'm sorry. We'll get in just one second. And then down here, some scoring and some other pieces there. And I even use this thing called a spline model for some of those interested, just to take a different look at some of the results, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. But back to the